History, Unit 2, The World Between Two World Wars, began in 1914 and ended in 1918, shattered the global economy. There was a great loss of life and property. Though there was a critical situation prevailed, the world got ready to face another world war in 1939. So what happened in the world in these 20 years? How the people got the guts to indulge in Second World War? Let us see the consequences in this lesson. First, let us see the Great Depression. The war also placed a heavy burden of debt on every European country. This created a trade barrier and placed a heavy burden of debt on every European country. America was financially in a sound position. America became a money lender to the world. Especially, European became the debtor countries. The debtor countries did not give back the interest and capital in time. So, USA could not earn profit. The trial of the American capital was aggravated by the US market crash in 1929. The first huge crash occurred on 24th October 1929. The market crash discouraged investors and consumers to such an extent that more and more people began to sell their shares and dispose of their stocks, but there were no buyers. The stock exchange in the Wall Street made millionaires as paupers overnight. International system of exchange. The Great Crash created economic depression not only in USA but almost all the regions of the world. England, to tackle this situation, decided to leave the gold standard. Immediately, number of countries left the gold standard. Repercussion of Great Economic Depression in politics. The depression changed the political conditions in several countries. In England, Labour Party was defeated, and in USA, the Republican Party was rejected.
The story begins at the end of World War I. With the successful Allied advance in 1918, Germany realized the war was unwinnable and signed an armistice ending the fighting. As its imperial government collapsed, civil unrest and worker strikes spread across the nation. Fearing a communist revolution, major parties joined to suppress the uprisings, establishing the parliamentary Weimar Republic. One of the new government's first tasks was implementing the peace treaty imposed by the Allies. In addition to losing over 1/10 of its territory and dismantling its army, Germany had to accept full responsibility for the war and pay reparations, debilitating its already weakened economy. All this was seen as a humiliation by many nationalists and veterans. They wrongly believed the war could have been won if the army hadn't been betrayed by politicians and protesters.
And betrayed by their leadership, and there was growing fear that their nation would be stuck in poverty and decline. In this climate of bitterness, Hitler rose to prominence. A gifted public speaker, he captured the people's disillusionment with a series of speeches calling for a stronger, unified Germany. He insisted that one group was to blame for the nation's post-war misfortunes: the Jews.
Hitler hated Jews very much. His policy of hatred spread among the Nazis. The Jews were removed from government position.
Hitler and his followers attempted a government coup in 1923, but the plan failed. Hitler was jailed for treason for 9 months. But the publicity from the failed coup made him more popular than ever. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression hit, destroying the German economy overnight and leaving millions unemployed. Hitler saw the ensuing chaos as his opportunity to seize power. He loudly criticized the ruling government and promised to return Germany to greatness. Long-suffering Germans believed they had finally found their savior. In Germany's 1932 elections, the Nazis won a majority of seats in parliament, and Hitler ran for president. Though he lost, His soaring popularity inspired President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint him Chancellor, the head of the German government. As Chancellor, Hitler wasted no time tightening his grip on every aspect of German life. He tripled the size of the military, violating the Treaty of Versailles. Under Hitler's orders, rival parties were banned, while paramilitary groups cracked down on protests and executed political opponents. Anti-Semitic laws prohibited Jews from working, voting, and occupying public spaces. A propaganda department produced art, films, and books praising Hitler and embracing his vision of a better Germany. After the death of President von Hindenburg in 1934, Hitler declared himself Führer, an absolute dictator. With Germany under his total control, Hitler would shift his focus to global domination.
The Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended the World War I, had become the root cause for the World War II.
In this video, we delve into the rise and fall of this historic leader. So who was Benito Mussolini? Benito Almirger Andrea Mussolini was born in Predavio, Italy on July 29, 1883. Benito's father, Alessandro Mussolini, was a blacksmith by profession and a revolutionary socialist and nationalist sympathizer. As a result of Alessandro's strong political beliefs, he named his eldest son Benito after three leaders he admired. His father continued to project his political beliefs onto Benito, which overall had greatly influenced his early political career. In 1902, Benito moved to Switzerland in order to avoid serving in the military, and it was here when he began to study the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche, Vilfredo Pareto, and George Sorel. He was arrested in 1903 for his involvement in a violent strike, which got him deported back to Italy. After returning back to Switzerland, he was arrested again in 1904 for falsifying his papers. Later that year, he returned to Italy to serve in the military for the next 2 years in exchange for being pardoned. Once Benito returned from service, he began writing for socialist newspapers, and after a few years, Benito became one of Italy's most prominent socialists. And by 1912, Benito was given the editorship of the Socialist Party newspaper, Avanti, which grew in circulation 5 times its original size under his leadership. By this time, Benito had rejected egalitarianism, which is a core principle of socialism. His ideological drift from socialism led to his expulsion from the Italian Socialist Party in 1914. After being kicked out of the Socialist Party, Benito shifted his support from class warfare to revolutionary socialism. In 1919, Benito announced a key component of his foreign policy, known as Spazio Vitale, which translates to vital space. This concept gave permission to conquer neighboring Sloven ethnic regions, due to Slavs being less developed humans, which was seen as justified because Italy was overpopulated. From October 22nd to October 29th, 1922, about 30,000 fascist blackshirts marched on Rome to demand the formation of a new fascist government. On October 28th, King Victor Emmanuel III gave power to Benito to form a new government, and was appointed Prime Minister upon the resignation of Luigi Facta. As Prime Minister, his main objective was to establish a totalitarian state with himself being the supreme leader. He started by making any opposition disappear. On Christmas Eve 1925, a law passed that changed Benito's formal title to head of government.
A misunderstanding prevailed between the king and Pope always. Mussolini, through Lateran Treaty in 1929, made an agreement with Pope. Vatican City was recognized as independent state. Pope will have entire power over the state. The king will not interfere in any matters, incomes and expenditures of the church. In return, Pope and the church recognized Mussolini's power over Italy. The Lateran Treaty helped Mussolini to rule Italy as per his wish. So, this was the condition of Italy before the Second World War.
Setting the stage for World War II.
The beginning of the nationalist movement in India. The year 1857 holds a significant place in Indian history. It witnessed the first revolt against the mighty British Empire in India. What started as the Sepoy Mutiny soon spread out like wildfire, mainly across northern and central India. However, this sporadic revolt failed due to the lack of coordination and planning of the revolutionaries. Nevertheless, technically, the revolt of 1857 remains the first war of Indian independence. The consciousness of one nation emerged in India. In India, the rise of nationalism was intricately linked with the opposition of colonialism, similar to the way it happened in Vietnam. People realized that they were experiencing a common suffering under the oppressive British colonial rule. This understanding brought the different groups together in their anti-colonial struggle. However, each group developed its own method of struggle against the British rule. The event which proved instrumental in the history of the Indian freedom struggle was the First World War. India had been forced to take part in the First World War, in which Britain had fought against Germany. To continue the war, the British had to increase their defense expenditure and so levied new taxes on Indians to amass money. They introduced income tax and increased the custom duties. The rise in taxes had an adverse effect on the common people, who were forced to live a life of extreme hardship.
Organization in India. Many Indian soldiers fought for the British in World War I, thinking that Indians would be given independence after the completion of war. The war ended in 1918. In 1919, the British government introduced diarchy in India. Diarchy means double rule. What Britishers said, nearly 250 years India was being governed by British. If suddenly they hand over the administration to Indians, it would be difficult to govern. Moreover, in those days, India was divided as small territories. But then it was big province. So they would provide Indian ministers to hold certain portfolios under transferred subjects. More than this, our Indian industries were given only technical and educational advice but not given any financial support. Our industries like handmade and small-scale industries were denied. In Ottawa in 1932, an economic summit was held. To develop the British economic condition, a bilateral trade treaty was signed, in which the participants, including India, agreed to buy only the British goods.
The nationalist movement in Indochina. In early history, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos were known as Indochina. Rising of nationalism. These regions were colonized by rulers of powerful countries such as France and China. To oppose this colonization, peoples of different communities come together and struggled against colonial domination as one unit, thus giving rise to nationalism. Republic Vietnam. Nationalism in Vietnam gave them formal independence in 1945. But even after the independence, rulers did not stop ruling Vietnamese and continued their torturing.
Ho Chi Minh, from 1890 to 1969. He was born in Tonkin. His articles in newspapers and especially the pamphlet French Colonialism on Trial made him well known as a Vietnam nationalist. Ho Chi Minh and his lieutenants organized the League for the Independence of Vietnam, or Viet Minh.
Finally, after 3 decades of a long struggle, Vietnam is raised as Republic Vietnam.
This picture is showing how Europe had colonized South Africa. But then Europe gave South Africa independence in 1910. The blacks in South Africa didn't have complete freedom though. While many people think South Africa to be all black, there were whites there too because of the European settlers. Something called apartheid happened though. The whites were the highest race and a group of them were called Boers. They were racist and didn't give the other races equal rights. The order of highest race to lowest race was mainly the following categories: white, Asian, and then black. But don't lose hope yet. There were people who were trying to stop apartheid. One of these people was Nelson Mandela. He is still alive today but is very old. Nelson Mandela was a black fighting for the equal rights for blacks. He was the president of the ANC.
We have a deal for you.
What is this deal you speak of?
We'll let you out of prison for life, but it's mandatory for you to stop your acts against apartheid.
I decline that offer.
Fine, then it looks like you'll be in prison for the rest of your life.
F.W. de Klerk was not allowed to speak out against apartheid. After F.W. de Klerk was elected as president, he gave a speech calling for a non-racist South Africa.
Going to see is the political development in South America. Before the European discovery of America, 3 centers of civilizations existed there in Mexico, in Central America, and in Peru in South America. The Mayas, the Incas, and the Aztec civilization were highly advanced. It is a group of 20 countries and 14 dependencies in the Western Hemisphere. Stretches from Mexico to Tierra del Fuego and much of the Caribbean. In 16th century, Aztec's empire collapsed by the adventures led by Spaniards named Hernan Cortes. Another Spaniard, Francisco Pizarro, led the conquest of Inca Empire. Simon Bolivar, called El Liberator, and Pedro I instigated the spirit of independence in South America. The Napoleonic invasion of Spain and Portugal in 1808 quickened the process of liberation struggle in South America. The Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine. When European kings wanted to help the King of Spain to crush the revolutionaries, USA intervened. Monroe, the President of USA, declared that if Europeans interfered anywhere in America, it would amount to waging a war against the United States. By 1830, the whole of South America was free from the European domination. Thus, US protected South America from Europe. But there was no one to protect them from the protector, that is, the United States. The Latin Americans fought not only Spain and Portugal, but also each other. Theodore Roosevelt made an important amendment to the Monroe Doctrine in 1904, which authorized US intervention in Latin America to maintain order. Last topic of our lesson. USA maintained and dominated the distant lands by giving economic aid. This was called dollar imperialism. Latin America protested American intervention and disliked their dollar imperialism. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the then American president, in his good neighbor policy agreed that the USA would not intervene in the internal affairs of any state and would give economic and technical assistance to Latin America.